Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for the Community Service Provider's role in diversifying apprenticeships. My name is Morgan Diamond, and I work at Young Invincibles. I'm joined by my colleague, Angela Morrison from the Chicago Jobs Council. She'll be on the phone also to help us answer any questions as they might pop up. I know that it is a hectic, ever-changing time right now, so I appreciate you all making the time out of your busy schedules to join us and learn more about today's topic. Just as a matter of housekeeping, again, if you would like to introduce yourself, we'd love to know who's on the line. Please go ahead and type in your name and organization in the chat feature. Everyone right now is muted, but if you do have a question that pops up, please feel free to ask it in the group chat. Or if you are calling in, please press *6 to unmute yourself, or you can click the phone icon in Zoom to unmute yourself as well. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, but we want this to be an interactive presentation and webinar, so we'll answer questions as they arise. I want to first thank our partners at the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity for supporting the Apprenticeship 101 and 201 workshop series that the Chicago Jobs Council and Young Invincibles facilitated about a year ago. That workshop series informed the recommendations on diversifying apprenticeships that we're providing to you all again today. So thank you again to DCO for sharing their resources to help make that workshop possible. So to give you a little bit of information on what we will cover today, I have an agenda that's on the screen. We'll first talk about the context around the lack of diversity in apprenticeship and why that matters, especially as we are working as a state to expand apprenticeship opportunities across the region. We also are going to talk a little bit about the Apprenticeship 101 and 201 workshop series that I just mentioned and how that workshop series helped service providers connect to apprenticeship expansion efforts in the state. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit more about integrating community service providers into Illinois' apprenticeship system. So to first give you a little bit of a high-level overview of the challenge of the lack of diversity in apprenticeships, I wanted to start by sharing just an overview of the economy overall. So prior to a couple of weeks ago when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we were experiencing record low unemployment figures that were a sign of how healthy the economy was. But if you dove a little bit deeper into those numbers, you see that the economy wasn't working for everybody, especially women and people of color. So women in Illinois are overrepresented in low-wage jobs. Even though women have higher employment rates than men overall, they're disproportionately occupying those jobs that, frankly, in these current times are probably most at risk for either being laid off or experiencing economic crisis as a result of the lost wages. People of color are also disproportionately represented among the unemployed. So Illinois has historically high unemployment rates for African Americans, as well as for Latinos. Young males of color in Illinois, especially those 20 to 24, have worse employment outcomes than the national average. And we also had the second highest unemployment rate for youth at one point here in our state. Additionally, lower credential attainment for people of color is a challenge for our state. And then on the flip side, businesses are facing challenges with filling skilled positions. So there are employers out there that have vacant jobs, especially jobs that are those middle skill jobs that require less than a college diploma or college degree, but more than a high school diploma, those middle skill jobs that can also provide great middle income for families. And the companies, however, despite them having challenges with filling positions, often have barriers to entry that look like expensive credentials or degrees as requirements to fill those vacant positions. All of this is to say, essentially, that we're facing kind of a mismatch in the labor market. There are employers, again, who need to fill roles, but there are also people who are looking for jobs and high-quality jobs at that. So there are a number of stakeholders who are working to identify how to address this mismatch in the labor market. And so both here in Illinois and nationally, experts have landed on apprenticeship as a potential solution to helping make this labor market a little bit better matched. Now, apprenticeships, of course, aren't a silver bullet, but they are definitely a solution. They're a win-win opportunity for both employers and for job seekers alike. So for job seekers, and many of you on the call already know that the benefits of apprenticeship are bountiful, but to give you a little bit of a more overview of why apprenticeships are such a great solution to this labor mismatch, we have apprenticeships for job seekers are great earn and learn opportunities. It helps people connect to a job and find work despite the lack of experience. Many people talk about that catch-22 of you need to have experience to get a job, but in order to get that experience, you have to have a job. So apprenticeships help overcome that catch-22. It provides wages while people are learning about a specific occupation in in-demand sectors. And for employers, it's also a boom for their business as well, because it helps lower long-term costs associated with high turnover. So for apprenticeships that are registered to the Department of Labor, the statistics show that those DOL registered apprenticeships have about a 91% retention rate for those apprentices who start with that employer. So instead of having to constantly pay to hire and train new people, those companies that have apprenticeship programs have the opportunity to reduce their turnover and recruitment cost. Additionally, because they are having such great retention and loyalty from their employees, employers that have apprenticeship programs experience economic growth rate through building skill sets. So essentially they have higher productivity rates among their employees because folks are invested in the job and stay on the job long enough to obtain mastery over their particular occupation. So apprenticeships are in fact a great opportunity for employers and job seekers alike, but in Illinois, the challenge is that apprenticeships aren't reaching all communities. So these statistics vary, based on quarterly reports, but overall, on average, in Illinois, 4% of apprentices are women and 28% are people of color. So this is obviously not reflective of our state's demographics, and we're missing an opportunity as a state to connect people who need jobs and face historic barriers and challenges and structural challenges to securing quality employment opportunities if we don't start to diversify apprenticeship. And the good thing is that our leaders, both in the legislature and the governor's office at DCO, are very supportive of diversifying apprenticeship. So now it's just a matter of how to do that. So there are a few challenges with diversifying apprenticeship, and I have a few of those listed here on the screen. The first is that job seekers often aren't aware of apprenticeship as an opportunity to connect them to career pathway. A few years ago, Young Invincibles did some research among young adults and asked them, are you aware of apprenticeship? And while about 65% said that they knew what an apprenticeship was, when we asked a little bit further, it turns out that they have deep misconceptions about apprenticeship and where they are in their communities. If apprenticeships are a lesser option than college. There are just a lot of misunderstandings about the benefits of apprenticeship among young adults and overall for all job seekers that's preventing them from connecting to those jobs. Another challenge is that there are some people who need to build essential skills prior to entering into an apprenticeship opportunity. For those populations that have faced chronic unemployment or other structural barriers to connecting to great jobs, they might be missing some of those job readiness skills or math and reading skills that are necessary prior to entering into an apprenticeship program. And so that is an additional challenge to increasing the diversity. Another challenge is that people who experience chronic unemployment might need some wraparound supports to help them overcome structural barriers like a lack of access to affordable housing or lack of access to affordable childcare. These type of barriers might prevent them from remaining successful in apprenticeship programs. And so even if you have a person who has the drive and the talent to become an apprentice, they might not be able to successfully complete because of some of those barriers that I just mentioned. But despite these challenges, there is an opportunity. There are organizations like many of you that are on the call that are already poised to serve the needs of potential apprentices from these communities that are often disenfranchised from the mainstream economy. So the question then is, given this opportunity, how can we connect all communities and women and people of color to apprenticeship? So what I'm going to do now is pose that question a little bit to you all. So part of the way to make this interactive is that we have a few polls throughout this conversation. And so I'm going to ask you all to answer the poll that's going to appear on the screen momentarily to share with us what you feel like are ways that we can connect all communities to apprenticeship. So I think I skipped the prompt, forgive me, there we go. So what do you all think is the biggest obstacle for connecting job seekers to apprenticeships here in the state of Illinois? So Latoya with SIU is on the phone to help us pop up a poll feature. So Latoya, if you don't mind sharing the poll with the participants.
Yes, the poll is currently showing. It states that attendees are now able to view the questions. Do you see the poll on your screen?
No, it looks like people can't. I can't see the poll.
And it's stating that it's active now. Okay, hold on.
Let's see. While those poll questions are coming up, I can present the questions and then it might pop up a little bit. The options are, is that a lack of awareness as a viable career opportunity that's preventing individuals from connecting to apprenticeship? Another option is the perception that apprenticeships are only in the building trades. Another one is feeling that alternatives to college are less prestigious or lucrative. It could also be that there's a need to build essential skills and stabilize life before entering into a rigorous career pathway. And then there, of course, could be other options. So in the chat feature, while we're kind of troubleshooting some of the technological challenges, please feel free to answer what you think are the biggest or what you think the biggest obstacle is for connecting job seekers to apprenticeship. So I see lack of employers offering apprenticeships. Employability skills, or the need to stabilize life and soft skills. Okay. A lack of awareness. Essential skills is another one. My experience is that there's a misconception on the part of employers that there's too much involved in offering apprenticeship or that it's too expensive. So it sounds like there are some employer awareness is a challenge and overcoming some of those misconceptions. Awareness in all directions. So from either the job seekers or the employers, they both have a lack of awareness.
And Morgan, just to chime in, there was a participant that was able to use the poll, and they chose need to build essential skills and stabilize life before entering a rigorous career pathway. So that was one of their choices.
Okay.
So it is available. I'm not too sure if you can see it, but it's there. Should be on your screen.
I don't still see the chat, but people are providing their options in the chat. So
okay.
Thank you. So it sounds like employers taking a risk on apprenticeships or even hiring certain populations or people with little or no skills. Okay. So there's a concern that employers might not feel ready to hire people that have perceived barriers. And again, job seekers aren't aware of this. Funding is also a huge challenge. Most jobs available to potential employees are typically small businesses. So we can see that there are a lot of potential obstacles. There's a diversity of answers in terms of what are challenges facing job seekers to connecting to apprenticeship, whether it's that employers just don't offer them in different sectors. Here in the state of Illinois, a vast majority of the apprenticeship opportunities are in the building trades. And so if a job seeker isn't necessarily interested in that, that is posing a challenge to them connecting to an apprenticeship opportunity. But then employers also might be a little bit shy to start an apprenticeship because of either funding or concern that it's just too cumbersome, or that an employer or the Department of Labor, the process to become registered might be a little bit cumbersome. So there are a number of obstacles facing job seekers connecting to apprenticeship opportunities. And I appreciate your flexibility in responding in the chat feature. But as we're just kind of moving along in the webinar, and I'm just clicking in my session, wanted to share with you all a little bit about what Chicago Jobs Council and Young Invincibles thought about how we can address some of those obstacles that you all mentioned facing job seekers and connecting to apprenticeship. So our kind of theory of change was that with increased awareness and training, community-based organizations or community service providers can play a vital role in recruiting and retaining underrepresented job seekers into apprenticeship opportunities. So essentially, many of you had said that awareness was a fundamental challenge on both the employer end and on the job seeker end in helping make sure that apprenticeships are more diverse in this state. And so we thought that with a workshop series, we could help increase that awareness among those people and organizations who have the highest touch with populations that are often underrepresented in apprenticeship opportunities. So that was the spirit behind our Apprenticeship 101 and 201 workshops. The Apprenticeship 101 and 201 workshops that we facilitated throughout the state last year, the goal of that was to train organizations that can or already do function as what we've called apprenticeship referral and retention providers, or ARRPS for short, on the basics of apprenticeship. So the workshop series, just to give you a little bit of a feel, we went through all 10 economic development regions in the state and reached over 203 attendees for the workshop series, the 101 workshop, and then the 201 workshop, which provided a little bit deeper dive into what an apprenticeship could look like in a community-based organization, had 83 attendees. So we trained a number of potential ARRPS, or again, apprenticeship retention and recruitment providers, on just the basics of apprenticeship. But in addition to that, we also trained navigators and intermediaries, which serve as kind of the foundation of the state's apprenticeship expansion efforts. I'll define a little bit more for those of you who are unfamiliar with navigators and intermediaries. I'll define those in a little bit later, but essentially, the workshop had a large reach. And I see there are a few questions popping up. Having a central apprenticeship bank would help make it a quick option for job seekers to research and weigh the feasibility for their own career choices. So that is extremely helpful. Thank you, Elizabeth, for providing that. There is an opportunity online to go and find registered apprenticeship opportunities in the state, and we can provide that resource at the end of the webinar as well. So what's an ARRP? What is an apprenticeship recruitment and retention provider? So an ARRP isn't a specific type of organization, it's really a function, and those are the organizations that can function as ARRPs are the ones that we wanted to reach in our workshop series. So ARRP functions are listed on screen. First, they can serve again as recruitment from diverse talent pools. So for organizations that already work with women and people of color and helping get them connected to jobs, they're already poised to help share to their populations and clients that apprenticeship is another viable pathway to a career opportunity. The pre-apprenticeship and preparatory programs is another function of the ARRPS. And a pre-apprenticeship essentially is a way to make sure that those individuals who might have missed out on job readiness skills or on foundational math and reading skills have the opportunity to upskill and become ready for an apprenticeship opportunity. The question is, apprenticeship 101 and 102, are they available online? They are not available online, but I think in the future, as you'll see later on in the webinar, one of the recommendations that we have is to make sure that there's ongoing access to training for community-based organizations. Oh, it looks like we have a poll that just popped up. So the wraparound supports is another function of the ARRPS. So the wraparound supports, I apologize, the poll is popping up. So the wraparound supports is another opportunity for organizations that are already providing retention services and recruitment services to provide their clients with essentially, access to childcare or access to transportation vouchers or helping them stabilize in housing. Anything that serves as a potential barrier for connecting to an employment opportunity or to an apprenticeship opportunity specifically, ARRPS can help mitigate that for clients that can serve as apprentices. So ARRPS can represent a variety of entities: community-based service providers, secondary schools, school districts, community colleges. You can see on the screen, there are a variety of organizations that can serve in ARRP functions because they are already providing many of these essential services. I see a comment that so many of job seekers don't have their GED or high school diploma, which is also a barrier to joining an apprenticeship. I completely agree with that comment. And so one of the functions of ARRPS can be to help make sure that people get those introductory skills and credentials like a GED or some of the math and reading skills necessary to help make sure that they have the opportunity to be ready for an apprenticeship program when they arise in their community. So just diving a little bit deeper into ARRP functions that can help diversify apprenticeship. Again, they can provide some of those essential skills that we just mentioned. They can serve as pre-apprenticeship providers, recruitment organizations. So especially for organizations that work with specific populations. For example, here in Chicago, Chicago Women in Trades works with women to help get them connected to jobs and apprenticeships in the building sector. They are a great example of an organization that can serve as an ARRP in providing those recruitment services from people who are often underrepresented in apprenticeship opportunities. Another question is, are there apprenticeships for individuals with learning disabilities? I am not aware of apprenticeships, a specific apprenticeship for individuals with learning disabilities, but I do think there is an opportunity for organizations that already work with individuals with any type of disability to serve as that kind of recruitment provider connecting to an apprenticeship program. So another opportunity for ARRP functions, or excuse me, another ARRP function is providing case management, barrier reduction, and job coaching. Then they could even sponsor an apprenticeship program if they felt like they had the capacity within their organization. So why are ARRPs needed? So ARRPs are needed because employers need skilled labor. We need to increase the diversity of apprenticeships in this state so that we can make sure that this great opportunity is reaching all communities. There is the supply side of why ARRPs are needed. There's high unemployment rate in Illinois compared with other states. And then we have chronically underemployed and unemployed individuals, many of whom are women and people of color. And so again, just to kind of drive the point home, ARRPs can provide support to job seekers, but need additional resources in many cases to help fill that need. So the reason why we at Chicago Jobs Council and Young Invincibles had our workshop series last year, the Apprenticeship 101 and 201, is to precisely to help make sure that those organizations that can help provide ARRP functions are poised to do so. So within the workshop series, and some of you on the call today were able to attend that, and thank you, we talked about some of the definitions and terminology associated with the Apprenticeship Illinois framework. So in Apprenticeship 101, we covered what is a pre-apprenticeship, what is a registered apprenticeship, what is a non-registered apprenticeship, what are the definitions for youth apprenticeship. We also talked about the various roles that community service providers can play in supporting apprenticeships in their community. So we talked about whether the community service providers could serve as the recruiters, they could serve as the folks who are offering wraparound supports. We also identified funding streams available for apprenticeship. Now, here in Illinois and really across the nation, workforce development overall, and even more specifically apprenticeship, are often funded by federal resources, but we did provide some information in those workshop series on what federal resources are available to help support apprenticeship. We also talked about the equitable apprenticeship framework. So essentially, not only how can we expand apprenticeship opportunities throughout the state, but how can we make them more equitable by providing the wraparound support services that I just mentioned. We talked about adapting current programming. So for those organizations that felt like they were interested in serving in an ARRP function, we talked about how they could adapt some of their current services to become and serve as an ARRP in their communities. And lastly, we talked about tips for supporting job seekers in apprenticeship programs. As a preview, the Chicago Jobs Council and Young Invincibles are going to release in the coming weeks a report that outlines some of our findings from the Apprenticeship 101 and 201 workshop series. And within that report, we have a few appendices that outline some of the content that we covered here in the workshop. So if you are interested in more of like tips for supporting job seekers and apprenticeship programs, stay tuned for that report release. So I have another opportunity for a poll. I know we've had a little bit of technical difficulties, but in the chat feature, I'd like to hear from you all how your organization, oh, it popped up. Can you all see the poll? I can see. Okay, perfect. So I'll give you a few moments to answer this question. How is your organization currently supporting businesses in their ability to connect to apprenticeship specifically? So I'll give you a few moments to answer that, and then we can debrief. Okay. Feel free to continue answering. Looks like we have about 60% of folks have voted. So if you want to give any last comments or answers to the poll question, go ahead and do so. Okay, so it looks like we have a tie for first place so far. The organizations on this call are currently providing wraparound supports to job seekers with employment barriers and are funding job readiness, apprenticeship, and other work-based learning programs. So we have, I'm guessing we have a number of LWIAs on the call, as well as individuals that are providing wraparound support. So that's great. Another role that you all are playing is serving as a recruitment partner. And we have actually a great diversity of results. So I'll go ahead and share the results with you all so that you can see the responses. But you can see that we do have a number of organizations who are already doing work of the ARRPS, whether that is on the recruitment side or whether it's more on the retention side and providing those critical wraparound supports and, of course, the funding necessary to do that. I'm going to pause right there and see if anybody has any reflections or comments on the roles that they feel most equipped to provide to businesses in terms of helping them diversify their apprenticeships. If there are any comments or questions, feel free to unmute at this time. Okay, so hearing none, we'll go ahead and just move on to some other questions. So how can we integrate ARRPS into apprenticeship? So that was kind of after the workshop series, Young Invincibles and Chicago Jobs Council just debriefed and had focus groups of some of the workshop attendees as well as subject matter experts throughout the state to discuss what exactly we can do to make sure that organizations who can serve as apprenticeship recruitment and retention providers are able to serve in that function. So as you can see on the screen, currently in Illinois, we have two main roles that are helping expand apprenticeship opportunities in the state of Illinois. Those roles are as navigators and as intermediaries. So if you're not familiar with these two functions, navigators are essentially the marketers of apprenticeship. They help businesses understand the value of apprenticeships and work-based learning programs overall and spread the word to both businesses and sometimes potentially job seeker organizations as well. And then the intermediaries are another function that the Department of Commerce is helping to support to increase the expansion of apprenticeship here in the state. But intermediaries essentially provide that implementation role so that organizations and employers that are poised to start an apprenticeship program have the needed supports in terms of braiding funding and helping to connect to job seekers who could fill the apprenticeship opportunities. But as you can see, as great as the navigators and intermediaries are, they don't have the capacity and really are focused on the apprenticeship expansion overall. They don't have the capacity, though, to work with individual job seekers to help make sure that they're successful in apprenticeship opportunities. And so that's where the function of the ARRPS can come in, to help make sure that apprenticeships in the state are diverse and equitable. And so when we're talking about ARRPS, what do you think it is that ARRPS need to be successful here in the state of Illinois? So when you think of what is it as an organization that you could use that would help make you well positioned to serve as an ARRP, what do you think some of those are? So we have a poll up again, so please feel free to answer that poll and we'll debrief it in just a moment. So it looks like so far employers that are willing to work with job seekers who have employment barriers is your biggest need as a potential ARRP. We'll take a few more seconds to let folks complete the poll. Okay. So it looks like that you all are saying that employers that are willing to work with job seekers who have employment barriers is a need that you have to serve as a successful ARRP. So it's not necessarily a lack of funding, which actually for me surprisingly came in lower than I expected, or a lack of technical assistance. It's really that there's a large gap in the employers who are willing to work with job seekers. I know some of you on the call, we have a few navigators on the phone. And somebody just mentioned in the chat feature that funding is available, but it's just difficult to access. But for those of you who are saying that employers are willing to work with job seekers who have employment barriers is one of your biggest challenges or one of your biggest needs to serve as a successful ARRP, I'd love to hear more about that. So I'm going to pause and just ask people to unmute their phones if they want to speak more to some of the challenges they've had with getting employers on board with hiring people who might have some barriers. Any thoughts on that?
Hi, this is Celeste from Heartland Alliance. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the barriers that I have in working with young people who are 18 to 24 is that, as one of the chat, as one of the individuals mentioned in the chat, is that a lot of our participants don't have a GED or high school diploma. So it's really hard to find apprenticeship programs for people who have these kinds of barriers and people who are who didn't go the traditional route of completing high school. So any advice on that?
Mm-hmm. And I would want to open up with the wisdom and expertise that we have on the phone as well too. And if anybody wants to chime in to answer that in the interim, I would say, sometimes the role of serving as kind of a pre-apprenticeship or preparation program for apprenticeships is the best function for a number of community service providers. And so it might be that, developing a GED program that's sector specific as best as possible could be an opportunity for Heartline Alliance or others to work with youth to help them get a GED, but by working with an employer to help them have some math skills that are in the context of a specific sector, that could increase retention and interest in a specific job, as well as helping them complete a GED. But I'm open, I would love to hear from others as well. Or if there are any other challenges that individuals are facing as far as employers working with those with employment barriers.
Hi, this is Cindy, or Cynthia on your screen. It probably shows. Our experience is that we have employers who are interested. They have a shortage, so they're interested in people that we can bring to them, and they're willing to accept some of those barriers or allow us to work through some of those barriers during our training before they commit to them. Our problem has been on navigating the state and the federal bureaucracy that allows us to get the training dollars to do that pre-apprenticeship training work and to do that those wraparound services for them. If we could solve that issue, quite frankly, to how we access those funds, we have employers who want our people. That's not our problem.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're falling in the flexible funding pool as one of your biggest needs.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I see in the comment section, Diana wrote that employers want people ready to work on their first day on the job. Few of them are willing to work with anyone still working on their GED or high school equivalency. So there is that challenge of working with participants to get their GED, but the need for a job that pays well is the barrier. So Earn and Learn is a great opportunity, but there's that obstacle that to get into at least apprenticeship program, you at least need to have your GED or high school equivalency, but you have to earn money at the same time to get that. So it is a challenge. Is there anybody on the phone that has had any success with connecting with people who are still working on their GED and getting them connected to either a work-based learning program or apprenticeship program? I'm not hearing any, but I definitely acknowledge the challenge, and I think there are advocacy efforts going on in the state to help secure flexible funding, not just for apprenticeship, but for other job development programs that can make sure that we have enough funding to provide wraparound services, that we have funding available for pre-apprenticeship programs, so that organizations like yours are able to provide maybe, pre-apprenticeship or even essential skills and GED preparation programs while offering, let's say, a stipend so that people can get that credential and as well as getting the needed money that they need.
This is Cindy. We are working on a transitional jobs program where essentially our social business enterprise will be able to hire people and place them on projects to take some of that risk off of the employers while they're going through training. And we don't have the same restriction that individual would have had to have completed their GED to participate in some of those skills training. So we are working to overcome that barrier, that give people an opportunity to earn even while they're dealing with some of those pre-employment requirements for education that would come into place by either an employer or the apprenticeship program itself.
Great, thank you.
And this is Nicole from Skills for Chicagoland's Future. We are now launching a program for Chicagoland for those who are interested, who are youth specifically. I think the limit is 27, but it's an online high school diploma that they would be pursuing while working at McDonald's. And I know when I say McDonald's, everyone rolls their eyes, but they are one of the most flexible partners and will be paying for the entire online high school program, and the students will get stipends for completing their coursework. So not only are they getting the hours from McDonald's, but also getting that incentive to complete and finalize their coursework. We're also offering our offices in case participants don't have the resources at home, and they will be getting professional development as well. So there is some opportunities, and hopefully more programs will open up like that. This is the first time we're doing a high school version of our kind of model, but hopefully we'll see it be successful.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Are there other examples that individuals wanted to lift up or models? And I'm seeing that there is a particular challenge in rural areas as well. Getting the messaging out, one participant mentioned across to our employers of their responsibility in helping to grow their own is challenging. WIOA funding has been cut in the last couple of years, and have also limited WIAs in providing more work and learn opportunities. So yeah, because our system relies heavily on WIOA in terms of funding apprenticeship, and Illinois is not unique in that. It's difficult when those federal resources are cut to connect or create apprenticeship opportunities in the state. So based on, and thank you for your feedback in those polls and also over the phone, based on the workshop series and the feedback that we received from attendees, as well as the focus group that we held afterwards to collect more information on what some of the challenges and needs were for potential ARRPS, we developed, CJC and YI developed recommendations for integrating ARRPS into our apprenticeship system here in the state. So as our previous slide had demonstrated, apprenticeship system right now is essentially those navigators and intermediaries that are charged with expanding apprenticeship by marketing and implementing apprenticeship opportunities in the state. But in order to make sure that they have the support of ARRPS, we recommended that we have dedicated flexible funding to provide those wraparound supports. So instead of just having federal funding, we're uplifting the need for there to be state dollars here in Illinois that go towards providing those services that are needed to help make sure people have either the equipment that they need, the childcare that they need, the transportation that they need, the housing that they need in order to be successful in an apprenticeship program. We're also recommending that both ARRPS as well as navigators and intermediaries receive ongoing technical assistance. So that ongoing technical assistance could be similar to those Apprenticeship 101 and 201 workshops that we offered. And it could cover things like the definitions of the Apprenticeship Illinois framework, the potential roles that ARRPS could play, and best practices for inclusive apprenticeship programming. There also is an opportunity for navigators and intermediaries as well to help support ARRPS integration into our apprenticeship expansion efforts in the state. So navigators as kind of the chief marketers for apprenticeship. One of their roles could be keeping an inventory of organizations in their communities that could help serve as either recruitment partners or retention partners. One of the challenges that Chicago Jobs Council and Young Invincibles found when we were doing the workshop series is that we just didn't know in some communities who those organizations were that could be potential ARRPS. And so navigators, with their ongoing recruitment efforts and kind of out in the community role that they play, could have a list of organizations that serve as ARRPS that we could continue expanding a database and knowledge and awareness of the organizations that are ready to become ARRP providers. Another thing that ARRPS can do is train stakeholders on terminology and best practices associated with apprenticeship. So the navigators could essentially be the ones who provide an apprenticeship 101 to organizations and different stakeholders in their communities. And navigators also can train new intermediaries on best practices with supporting ARRPS. So as new intermediaries in different sectors come on board, those navigators can provide, again, an apprenticeship 101-like curriculum to those newer intermediaries. Then the intermediaries themselves can make sure that they're implementing ARRPS into the apprenticeship programs that they're helping to support employers in creating. So, you know, and an intermediary can help, let's say, for example, make sure that if they're working with an organization or an employer in the building trades, they can reach out to an organization that works with women, for example, like Chicago Women in Trade, so that that Chicago Women in Trade can serve as the ARRP that's helping increase the pipeline of women into that apprenticeship program. Intermediaries can also identify funding streams to support ARRPS work. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about how the funding challenges exist for many employers, as well as for those who also want to help support create apprenticeship in their community. And so intermediaries can have that expertise to make sure that any funds that are available are braided appropriately to help increase and support the apprenticeship opportunities in their regions. So the recommendations for a statewide system, in addition to the recommendations we have for both ARRPS as well as Navigators and intermediaries, there's also some statewide recommendations that we have. First, if we are, our ultimate goal is to increase the diversity of apprenticeships and make sure that women and people of color have the opportunity to access these opportunities. We first need to set equity targets and know exactly what it is that we're reaching for. So one example could be that, you know, by 2025 or by 2020, we'd like to see X number or X percent of women in apprenticeship opportunities in the state. Without having those concrete goals and concrete targets, we don't know exactly what it is that we're aiming for. We want to be realistic and ambitious. So we're recommending that those equity targets are set at a statewide level. We also recommend that the navigators and intermediaries receive ongoing training. So this is an ever dynamic environment in terms of apprenticeship. For example, last week, the National Apprenticeship Act is up for reauthorization, and there's some language that the House just presented for stakeholders to weigh in on. If that National Apprenticeship Act is actually passed in Congress, then we'll have a new set of regulations to follow. And so navigators and intermediaries need to be trained on all of that new information that might trickle down at our state level. And then another recommendation that we have is to use, for example, the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship funding, which is about $25 million dedicated to creating pre-apprenticeship opportunities in the building trade sector. Specifically, the $25 million is to help make community-based organizations create pre-apprenticeships that reach women and people of color. So with that money that is out there, we're recommending that we have pilot equity targets just to test it out, at least in the building trades, and then make it statewide across all sectors. So overall, our takeaways from the apprenticeship project are that the organizations interested in apprenticeship needed this training, but they were also interested in apprenticeship. When I say that they need the training, it's that there were organizations that weren't aware really of apprenticeship or how it could connect to their populations, but they were, once hearing about the benefits of apprenticeship, interested. But in order to help make that interest a reality, those ARRPS need funding to provide those critical recruitment and wraparound support services. They need access to ongoing training. Again, as I mentioned, it is an ever-changing environment. And navigators as well and intermediaries need that training. And the state should set some specific equity targets. I'm seeing a comment, if we want an industry to diversify from traditional employees, we need to create an incentive like the tax credit to get employers to seek out the diversity. So yeah, so if those of you who are unaware, there is a tax credit available here in the state. It started January 1st of this year. So it's an education tax credit for those employers that start a registered apprenticeship program. There's a $3,500 tax credit per apprentice. But then there's an additional tier of the tax credit where if an employer hires an apprentice from kind of a low-income community, then that employer gets an additional $1,500 credit to go towards the education expenses of that they incur on behalf of the apprentices. So those kind of additional carrots to get employers on board with hiring people who might be underrepresented in apprenticeship, I agree with Lee, those are great solutions to helping expand apprenticeship in the state. So that is all of the content that we have. I wanted to open it up in these last 10 minutes to question and answer, or also provide an opportunity for those of you who have any other ideas about diversifying apprenticeship. We wanted to give some time for you to uplift those as well. Are there any questions? Or comments? All right. Well, not hearing any, I wanted to thank you all again for your time today. Stay tuned for our report release that is going to come out in the next few weeks. It outlines some of the information that we talked about today, as well as providing some of those additional resources that we provided during the Apprenticeship 101 and 201 workshop. But again, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thank you.